How is everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brian Logan, and today we got to talk about the minimum wage being raised in 18 states and 20 cities. Now, I do a video like this every now and again and talk about how bad the minimum wage is, how it's not a good idea. This ain't even really a liberal versus conservative ideology talking point. It's just basic common sense, basic math. Once you understand business like the way I understand business and the way many others understand business and math in general, you would know this is a bad idea. What we're going to do right now is get into this article and see what they say. I'm not really sure if they're going to spin it positive or negative. This is from USA Today, so it could go either way, but we're just going to read what's happening here, and then I'm going to give you my response as we progress. All right. So you saw the headline, of course. 18 states, 20 cities raising the minimum wage. Now, there's a little video right here, but they don't really show you too much. Well, actually, this headline in the video says the minimum wage is going to jump in 21 states and 38 cities and counties. Okay, very interesting. Now, the article says the movement to lift earnings of low-paid workers will gather in force in 2018, with a growing number of states and cities raising the minimum wages to as high as $15 per hour, which is way, way too high. And I'll talk about why in a little bit. Proponents say the initiatives can help narrow a widening income gap between the wealthy and the poor. Business advocates say they're already leading to restaurant closings and layoffs. Yes, income gap. How are you going to decrease the income gap by making it more difficult for people who have less money, who have less skills to be able to get into the job market at all? All you're going to do is just create more unemployment. And that thing right there, the last line in that particular paragraph talking about is going to have restaurants be closed, layoffs happen, of course, because most restaurants, most places in general that pay minimum wage cannot really afford to pay more than that. Money is a finite resource. It does not grow on trees. Just because you are a business, just because you do business, does not mean you have an infinite amount of money to be able to pay employees whatever you want. And the thing about it is, how many employees do you have? You may have a staff right now of, let's say, like you have 10 people working at $7.25 an hour. If the wage doubles, the cost to the business also doubles. So how can they keep those same 10 people at $15 an hour? Maybe they cut it down to 5 people. So 5 people got a raise, but 5 people also got fired. So what's better? Getting a raise to $15 an hour, but having a lesser workforce, having more work on your back and having 5 people out of a job, or having everybody at $7.25, easier work and more jobs, right? And that's in a good scenario, but I'm going to digress for now. I'm going to keep going through the article. On or about January 1st, 18 states and 20 cities, including many in California, will hike their base pay because of laws or ballot initiatives that mandate gradual raises over several years or automatic cost of living increases. Later in the year, another 3 states and 18 cities and counties will boost their pay floors, according to the National Employment Law Project, a worker advocacy group. Yeah, to see the pay floor, that's a good way for them to put it right there. I'm kind of surprised they did that, because all you're doing really by raising the minimum wage, you're raising the floor higher to the ceiling. Like you're creating less of an income gap, but you're having less people in the whole market in general. You're not actually raising money. You're just, it's a artificial thing. It's not really real. And when you get down to brass tacks, you're going to see that it's going to hurt more than it helps. People talk about Walmart and all the other big companies that pay minimum wage, billion-dollar companies. But the reality is most employers are not big business. 99% of businesses in the United States are small, and about 70% of jobs come from small businesses. Now, yes, the very big businesses account for a very large portion of the jobs, maybe about 30%, which is pretty big when you're talking about maybe 5% of jobs, 1% of jobs yielding 30% of all jobs in the U.S. However, minimum wage jobs are minimum for a reason. And it's funny how nobody ever says, we need to just abolish volunteerism, because that exists. You can work for free if you want to. You can go work at a homeless shelter, rec center, hospital, whatever you want for free. You also have unpaid internships, low paid internships, and then there's a whole thing about waiters and waitresses who get paid less than minimum wage but make more in their tips. What if you told a waiter or a waitress, okay, we're gonna give you $15 an hour, but in return you won't get any tips, or if you do get any tips, you have to give it back to the restaurant? Like, how would you want that? I think the person that is a waiter or a waitress would rather get paid less than minimum wage and then rely on their tips rather than getting paid $15 an hour and having their tips be eliminated or compromised. But I digress yet again. 12 of the states and many cities are set for relatively large increases as part of a multi-year phase-in, while 9 states are rolling out smaller cost of living bumps. Now, my thing is this. If the minimum wage was so great, if it was so easy to obtain, then why is it being rolled out in phases? Why is it being just like slowly crept in? Like, explain to me why. If you really ask that question to people who are in favor of minimum wage, if they know the real reason, they won't tell you. But the real reason is they're trying to lessen the burden on businesses. If it's a good thing and businesses can afford it, why do you got to roll it in so lightly to so-called lessen the burden? It doesn't make any sense. The pay hikes have been linked, at least in part, to nationwide fast food worker demonstrations and demands for a $15 per hour wage since 2012. Those pleas were initially deemed far-fetched, but now California, of course, California, always in the lead in cases like this. New York and more than a dozen cities are moving toward that standard by 2022 in a wave that will cover 1 in 5 U.S. workers. That's their goal, for it to cover 1 in 5 U.S. workers. But I wonder what kind of labor pool you would have. Will it be greater than it is today, or will it be lesser? Will it be more people as a percentage in a labor pool or less in these places where they raise minimum wage? I wonder. For example, the pay floor is set to rise from $9 an hour to $10 an hour in Maine, and from $11 an hour to $13 an hour for large employers in New York City. In Florida, by contrast, an inflation indexed rise will nudge base pay from $8.10 to $8.25 per hour. Many states and locales have lower base wages for tipped employees, such as waiters. Yes, which is fine. I don't think they really want the high minimum wage over the tips that they get, because the tips dwarf the per hour wage they get from the restaurant. Especially you have a good restaurant, a good area, you can get, $100 a night, $200 a night, $300 a night or more. You might get a whale to come in there and give you a tip for like $500 just from one table. And you might not even do anything to get that money. So, yeah, I think they will prefer to have the lower wages versus higher wages and no tips. But I digress. A few months ago, Sarah Delty, a part-time cashier at Jack in the Box in San Jose, got a raise from $12 an hour to $13.25 in anticipation of a city-mandated minimum wage increase to $13.50 on January 1st. I'm able to get my son Christmas presents and a new pair of shoes, probably some Jordans, but I'm not able to save, says Delty, 37, who receives a rent subsidy and food stamps. Okay, pause. Okay, Sarah, 37 years old, working at Jack in the Box, and you trying to raise your son on that? Something's wrong. I don't think this is something that the state should really be getting involved with as far as raising wages and stuff like that. I think this is more about her obtaining necessary skills to be able to live life appropriately. And where's the man? Where's the husband? Where's the boyfriend or something? Okay, this is more of a social issue than it is a government come fix it and come rescue me issue. She says a $15 per hour wage will allow her to begin socking away some money. Now, here's another question I have, another point I'm going to make here. If you get paid $15 an hour, that means you get paid hourly. Therefore, the number one thing that will determine how much money you get paid, aside from the actual wage per hour, is the hours you get. So let's say she's getting $13.50 now, or $13.25, whatever it is, and she's getting like 35 hours a week. They give her a so-called raise to $15 an hour, but they cut her hours to 20. Is she getting more money or is she getting less money? She effectively got a pay cut, even though she got a pay raise, because her per hour wage was increased, but her take home pay was cut. So I think people should be more concerned about getting better skills that will allow them to get the kind of work they want, to be able to pay for things that they need in life, things that they want in life, rather than trying to have the government come interfere. The government does not really do things like this very well, and we all know that. Some cities are pushing the envelope. In Silicon Valley, both Mountain View and Sunnyvale will lift their pay floors from 13 to 15 an hour on January 1st, joining Seattle for large employers who don't provide benefits at that benchmark. San Francisco and New York City, for firms with more than 11 employees, will join the $15 per hour club later in the year. Good grief. I mean, come on. San Francisco and New York City, believe it or not, both have very deep problems with poverty. You know, San Francisco touts itself to be so liberal and so inclusive and all this and that, and just a liberal haven, but they don't tell you about the ghettos that exist in San Francisco. They also don't tell you about black folks that are being moved out of San Francisco and being moved to Oakland, or even further out than that. Sometimes they got to go all the way out to Stockton and stuff like that. They're being pushed far, far away. Yet and still, San Francisco has a very high minimum wage. Oakland has a high minimum wage, but not as high as San Francisco. And it just so happens that Oakland has many more black folks, like 30% black in Oakland versus like 6% black in San Francisco. Is right across the bridge from each other. So why the disparity in the population percentage? Maybe it's because of the high cost of living, of the high floor of being able to get a job. Understand this. If your minimum wage is $15 an hour, how can a 16-year-old with no experience compete with a full-grown adult that would want that same job? When you are a young person, minimum wage, low-skill jobs, that's a job that you need to get in order to get some experience, to get your foot on the employment ladder, and you grow from there. You don't just stay there forever. When you're 16 years old, you're not going to stay flipping burgers for 20 years. You're going to move to different jobs. When I was 17, I washed dishes. I did that for 5 years throughout my college career, and up until the point where I started doing my business, which I'm doing right now, doing the whole graphic design and stuff like that. I knew I would not be there forever. They were trying to train me on different stuff. I'm like, no. I don't want to be trained on how to be a cook or nothing. I just want to wash my dishes, get my money, and be out of here when I'm done with school. That's what it was. That's what it is. Some people don't have that kind of mentality. They want the government to allow them to remain comfortable in this low-skilled, low-education job that is meant for kids to have when they're in high school and college. Okay? Back to the article. That full-time minimum wage worker in New York, hold on, I'm going to pause right here. Full-time minimum wage worker is an oxymoron. If you work at minimum wage, you're not getting full-time for a couple of reasons. First of all, when you get above a certain amount of hours, I think it's like 38 or 39 hours, you now have to get full-time benefits. Okay. Now, if you work at minimum wage, that defeats the whole purpose, because now they got to pay you more money on top of what you were getting paid in your wage, because those benefits cost the employer. So you're not getting full time. See, they kind of couch it like that in this really vague language. They say, oh, full time worker. If you work full time, you deserve a living wage, knowing full well that nobody who works minimum wage is going to get full time hours. Number two, you're not really going to get above 30 hours, because as of right now, Obamacare is still a law of the land. If you get paid, if you make more than 30 hours in the week, you are required to get healthcare benefits, yet another cost to the employer. And again, why would they do that if they're paying you minimum wage? You'd be lucky to get 25 hours. So this whole full-time minimum wage worker thing is a myth. It's a fugazi talking point from the left. But I digress. That quote unquote full-time minimum wage worker in New York City now earning $22,000 a year. What? There's nobody. Look, okay. I don't know where they got the number from. 22. Okay, hold on. Wait a minute. Let's say you make $15 an hour. Wait, matter of fact, hold on. When I made 37.5 hours, making $8 an hour, when I was probably about 21, the most I would make in the year after taxes, my take home was like $10,000. $8 an hour, pretty much full time. So the only way you're going to be able to get $22,000 a year take home is if you made, like, you're talking about $16 to $18 an hour. So that's not minimum wage. And that's if you don't miss a day. You don't miss, because I didn't miss any days. You can't miss any days, no absences or nothing. So That math is wrong. $30,000, $15 an hour. No, that's not going to happen. If you made $15 an hour, the most you would get is about 20,000, not 30,000. This is just lies. Back to the article. Meanwhile, 4 states, Colorado, Hawaii, Maine, and Rhode Island, will boost their minimums to $10 or slightly more on New Year's Day, with Maryland taking that step by July 1st. They'll join 8 states already at or above that level: Arizona, California, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, Oregon, Vermont, and Washington. The raises that workers have been fighting for the last 5 years are finally arriving in paychecks, says Paul Sun, NELP's general counsel. They're starting to get to a more meaningful level. States and localities have acted as Republicans in Congress have blocked efforts to raise the federal minimum wage to $7.25 an hour in recent years. As a result, 29 states with 60% of the U.S. workforce now have pay floors that are above the federal government's. Meanwhile, 16 states plan campaigns in 2018 to lift base pay even higher through legislation or the ballot. There are proposals for $15 an hour in 10 states, including Florida, Illinois, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. Among the 21 states still stuck at the federal minimum, Pennsylvania is expected to consider a bill that would more than double that floor to $15 an hour. Unreal. The raises are broadly juicing the paychecks of Americans on the lowest rungs of the income ladder. No, they're not. Look, if you get a raise, like if you just raise the floor to 15, all you do is just raise the bar for people to cross. Okay, when you have a high play floor like that, you're going to increase more highly skilled people. I'm 33 years old. If I can go to McDonald's and flip burgers $15 an hour and get like 20 hours a week, I do it right now. And I have experience working in the food industry, 5 years of experience, and I'm good. I'm a dedicated worker. I got reliable transportation. So how could a 16-year-old who is trying to get their foot on that economic ladder, on that employment ladder, how can they compete with me? And I'm not some special kind of person. I'm just a regular person. There are many more guys and girls like me out there who would do the exact same thing I'm doing. You would have adults taking over these jobs, which is what's happening right now. I mean, go to places like Atlanta, black folks moving out there in droves with no job experience, no job skills, no nothing. They go out there and they end up working these low skill, low paid jobs. So then you got these teenagers out here with no job prospects because you got all these adults working in here. When I go into a McDonald's and I see all adults, I'm like, okay, what's going on? I'm seeing bad decisions being made by these people. I'm not judging them. I'm not saying they're bad people, but you should have mostly young people in a place like McDonald's, not people that are in their 40s and 50s trying to scrape by. Okay. But let's go ahead and finish the article out right here. Workers in the bottom 10th percentile of hourly wages received an average 5% pay hike in the first half of 2017 compared with a year earlier, significantly more than any other group, according to an analysis by the left-leaning Economic Policy Institute. I'm so excited that I don't have to constantly choose between paying my bills or doctor's visits. Chantel Walker, 36, a Papa John's worker from Brooklyn, New York, set her for imminent raise from $12 to $13.50 an hour. Again, 36 years old, working at Papa John's. Where did you go wrong in life? Do you have any children? Are you married? What's going on? But Michael Saltzman, research director for the Employment Policies Institute, which is partly funded by the restaurant industry, says the hikes have increased business costs, yes, especially for restaurants. In San Francisco, he says dozens of eateries have shuttered as a result of the increases. Quote, you're seeing restaurants closing. You're seeing employees lose hours of work in their jobs and a slowdown in employment growth, unquote, as some outlets replace workers with ordering kiosks. Oh, yeah. I didn't even talk about automation. Oh, my goodness. Think about it like this. If you look at over a year, like I'm all about math. My calculator is always right here on my desk. I'm all about math. If over a year you have to pay an employee, you need them for like 35 hours. If you need them for that long, you got to pay not only the $15 an hour for the wage, you also got to pay taxes on that. Then you got to pay all kind of stuff, payroll tax, insurances on the actual person. You got to pay for any kind of materials they need. You got to pay for um, everything. It's a whole lot. It's a lot of things you got to pay for, not just the wage, but taxes and all kind of other ancillary expenses that come with a human being working. Okay, at $15 an hour. Now, if you can get a machine to do the exact same thing that they do, how much would a machine cost over a certain amount of years? Okay, so let's say that employee will cost you X amount of dollars over a 3-year period, and the machine will cost you Y. If the Y is less than the X, then why would you use the employee at X, the human being? Why would you do it? Okay. And the machines, and many times, are much easier. They don't have any sick days. You don't got to worry about any kind of, variables that a human being is going to have by human nature. You could put that machine right there in the front of your store, and you could push a button and get what you want. Prime example, go to Wawa right now, the gas station. I'm not quite sure if you have them where you live. It's like a 7-Eleven, Sheetz, or whatever. Go into Wawa. You can get your sub right there on the screen. You can push a few buttons, and then boom, the sub, you got a receipt. You got one guy behind the counter making your sub, maybe two, but you only got to talk to the people. It's getting to the point now you can do the same thing in the Wendy's or McDonald's. Okay, you can just go up to the actual kiosk, push buttons about what you want, and then just go about your business, and you're good. That's how it's going to be coming up here soon. The human beings are going to be pushed out by automation, which is going to be pushed forward by how can I phrase this? By human beings being outpriced of the market. Some would say the automation is going to come regardless, but maybe not so quickly. It's just like saying everybody's got to die. Everybody ain't going to live forever, but you're not going to hasten your death. You want to live for as long as you can. Okay, so you're not going to just say, well, I'm not going to live anymore because I got to die someday. Okay, automation is there, but you don't want to hasten it along. And raising the minimum wage, raising the cost of doing business is most certainly going to hasten in automation. It's also going to really empower the big businesses, because if I'm Walmart, I can sustain losing millions of dollars a day versus a mom and pop store who has now been forced to double their payroll expense, which is the biggest expense any business has. They can't survive. Walmart can. So let's say they're a mom and pop hardware store down the street from Walmart. They're paying their employees $8 to $10 an hour. The wage raises to $15 an hour. How can they continue to compete? They're already competing with Walmart having a hardware department down the street from them. So then they got to raise their wages. They can't compete. They're already losing business because of Walmart down the street, and they got to pay higher wages. The money just ain't going to come in. They're going to constantly be in the negative. That's how that's going to work. Back to the article. A University of Washington study in June found a second step of the minimum wage rise in Seattle from $10.50 to $13 per hour in January 2016 increased hourly pay in low-wage jobs by 3%, but reduced the number of hours worked in such jobs by 9%. Exactly what I was saying earlier. If you're raising the wages, but you're reducing the hours of a person, are you getting a raise in your take-home pay? You may work less hours and get paid similar to what you got before, but it was a lateral move. All you did was just work less hours. And the reality is you still got the same amount of work that has to get done. And the reality is you still got to do work. You still got the same work that has to be done. It's still there. So you still got to put hours in. You just got to work harder in a shorter amount of time to get paid the same amount of money or less. So what's the purpose? Total earnings for those workers were cut by an average of $125 a month in 2016, according to the study. But a UC Berkeley study of that pay hike found a negligible effect on employment. Negligible. When they say negligible, what they mean is, well, it did affect employment. People did get fired, but it wasn't that bad. I'm going to close with this. I'm going to wrap it on up. I may have been all over the place with my comments on this article, but basically, look, raising the minimum wage is a bad idea no matter where you put it. I think there should be no minimum wage. I think you should be able to pay whatever you want to pay somebody as long as they agree. Now, some would say, are you talking about slave wages? Look, slavery, that's something you really shouldn't invoke, because slavery is an involuntary thing. You have no choice. You are conscripted. It's like when you were having to fight battles, when they had to draft, it wasn't a choice. It's like, look, you're going to fight or go to jail. Okay. So you have a choice. You can not work. You can try to find a way to get money some other way. You can start your own business. You can have a roommate that has some money or something. You could do other things other than work a job for a certain amount of money. Okay. Because it just makes sense. Like me being self-employed, I make my own prices. If you run a website or something like that, I evaluate what you got going on and I say, okay, X amount of dollars I'll do the website. There's no law that says how much I have to charge or how much I must be paid at minimum. I could do it for free if I wanted to. I can come in and volunteer, do your website for free. I can do whatever I want because I have that agency over myself. But when you are an employer and employee, for some reason, the government needs to be involved with that. Why should they be involved? If myself as a private individual having a private business, I have the agency to be able to charge and get paid whatever I desire, whatever myself and the person or persons in question agree upon. Why can't that same principle be applied to employees and employers? It should be, but that's just not where we are. This minimum wage, all it does is just really price low skilled workers out of the market because you're going to attract more high skilled workers. Like I said before, I'm not going to work for $7.25 an hour flipping burgers, but $15 an hour, $20 an hour, I do that all day long. And the people that really need those jobs at the lower pay, who have low skills, sometimes low intellect, they have no chance of competing with me at a higher pay. It's just not possible. You know, it's just like having the guy on the street, wino on the street trying to compete for the job of CEO of Disney. How are you going to compete with Bob Iger? Like, how is that possible? How can you do it? But if it was a lower skill job like CEO of a lemon stand or something like that, you can do it, you know, or to volunteer somewhere, you know, or to be a waiter or waitress or something like that. At the end of the day, as I close, there are certain jobs, certain people, there are certain pay grades for certain people, for certain skills, for certain intellects, for certain criminal past or whatever have you. Those exist for those people. When you start to try to socially engineer these pay grades, you begin to have negative effects on employment, on businesses being able to thrive. Small businesses, the big businesses are helped because in the landscape where there are no competition, in the landscape where you need more money to operate as a business, the small businesses will suffer and the big ones will succeed. When the small ones suffer, that just gives the bigger businesses more business because they just fold all of it into itself. The Walmart example, if you have a beauty salon, a hardware store, a home goods store, and they all close because of the wage increase, guess what? Walmart has all those apartments in their store. So rather than everybody going to those individual smaller shops, they go to the Walmart now and empower them. So the big, bad, evil corporate white man just gets more money because you wanted to raise the minimum wage. You wanted to give people an artificially higher wage that did not earn it, that did not deserve it. So that's pretty much all I got. I'm being long-winded. But what do you think? Do you think that raising the minimum wage is a good thing? If you think that way, then please explain to me why in the comments below. I'd love to hear your point of view. Why is it a good thing? Explain to me how. And how do you explain away all the studies that have shown that you're going to have drops of employment, drops in hours, less small businesses being able to succeed, and it's going to help the big businesses? Okay. Or do you pretty much agree with me? Do you think that raising the minimum wage is a bad idea? Should there be a minimum wage at all? I think not. I think there should just be people volunteering to do whatever they want to do. If you want to pay somebody a certain amount of money and they want to accept it, that should be what it is. And it shouldn't be the federal government getting their mitts all over it. But whatever your comments are, please let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.